Damn them all, every smug smile, every lie they thought I'd swallow. I'm Anna, 33, the family's forgotten daughter. Until the day I called for help and they slammed the door in my face. I lost everything. But when they came crawling back thinking they could take what I built, I didn't just say no. I made them regret it. I'm Anna, 33 years old, born and raised in a sleepy little town tucked deep in Pennsylvania. If you blinked while driving through, you'd miss it. But for me, it was impossible to escape. My childhood home sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with trimmed hedges, white fences, and polite smiles that never looked too long in your direction. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, and everything you failed to become. I realized early on that my place in the family wasn't really a place at all. I was the shadow behind the spotlight, the forgotten one. My younger brother Tyler was 2 years my junior, but the day he was born, it was like someone had flipped a switch. Suddenly, every room I walked into felt colder. Every smile from my parents had a different target. Evelyn and Martin, my mom and dad, never said it outright, but their actions screamed it every day. Tyler was the sun. I was the wallpaper. When I brought home straight A's, they'd say good without looking up. When Tyler passed a science test with a C+, my mom baked a cake. Once, I won the school's creative writing contest. I came home clutching the certificate, heart pounding, eyes searching for some flicker of pride. Instead, my dad asked if I could keep the noise down. The game was on. Birthdays? Tyler had balloon arches, chocolate fountains, the latest game consoles. I got clearance socks, notebooks with the stickers still half attached, a card with "Love you, I guess" scribbled beneath my mom's rushed handwriting. The year I turned 11, Tyler got a new mountain bike. I got told, girls don't need bikes. Over time, I stopped asking, I stopped showing, I stopped expecting. I taught myself to clap from the corners, to disappear during celebrations, to wear a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Tyler, meanwhile, flourished. He got used to being adored. He learned that effort wasn't necessary when people already believed in you. And when he married Stephanie, the kind of woman who could cry on cue and twist any situation into sympathy, the favoritism grew monstrous. Stephanie was cunning. She could burn a pot of pasta and still have my parents consoling her for having had such a hard day. If anyone dared to call her out, she cried. Always loud, always timed, always perfect. I watched them all from a distance. I moved out after college and built a quiet life of my own. I worked my way up at a furniture company in Pittsburgh, rented a modest apartment, and only returned home when absolutely necessary. Because every visit felt like stepping into a house where my name didn't belong. Still, I believed, maybe foolishly, that one day things would shift. That hard work would be seen. That distance would earn me dignity. I never imagined that it would take losing everything to find out just how alone I truly was. When the pandemic hit and my company downsized, I was let go with a short, heartless email. We regret to inform you. My chest tightened as I read the words over and over again, hoping they might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. For a moment I just sat there on my apartment floor, knees pulled to my chest, the air stale and silent. I had a few weeks' savings, no job, no safety net, no one waiting for me at the end of the day. Should I call them? Will they even pick up? What if they say no? My fingers trembled as I dialed, my heart pounded. A part of me, small but stubborn, still clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they'd say, "Come home, Anna, we'll figure this out together." The phone rang once, twice, then my mother's voice, sharp and unbothered, cut through. "Hello? Hi, Mom, it's me, Anna." A pause. I almost imagined the sound of her lips pressing into a tight line. "Oh, hi. I lost my job. It's been hard. I was wondering if I could maybe stay at home for a little while, just until I get back on my feet." There was silence on the other end, then a sound I wasn't prepared for, laughter, cruel, effortless laughter. "This house is already full, Anna," she said flatly. "We can't add another mouth to feed." My breath caught, my hands clenched around the phone, and somewhere in the background I heard Stephanie's voice, that familiar sneer. The first night in that Walmart parking lot was long, longer than I thought time could stretch. I woke up every hour to the sound of cars pulling in, shopping carts clanking, and engines idling. My breath fogged the windows. I had no curtains, no privacy, just me and the cheap fabric of my camper shell, thin as paper between me and the world. By morning, my back ached and my throat felt like sandpaper. I walked into the store, bought a bottle of water and a 99-cent pack of crackers, with a smile I didn't feel. The cashier didn't look twice at me. That was the worst part. I already looked like someone invisible. The next few weeks bled into each other. I moved from one parking lot to another, trying not to overstay in any one place. I found a 24-hour gym where I could shower. I used gas station restrooms to brush my teeth and bought a portable phone charger I could plug into outlets at fast food joints while pretending to sip coffee I couldn't afford. Every day I applied for jobs. Anything. Anywhere. I handed out resumes with a practiced smile and spoke like someone whose voice hadn't cracked from screaming alone in the dark. "Hi there, I'm Anna. I was wondering if you're still hiring?" Sometimes they nodded politely. Sometimes they didn't even pretend to care. At night I'd lie awake in the camper staring at the dark fabric ceiling, whispering into the silence, "You can't break, not yet." The weather became my enemy. On freezing nights I wore everything I owned, 3 shirts, a hoodie, 2 pairs of socks, and still woke up with numb fingers. On hot mornings I sweated through my clothes before the sun even rose. I started to smell like desperation. One night, while parked behind a quiet church lot, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were hollow, my lips cracked. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. But there was something else too. Fire. Quiet. Relentless. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I didn't call my parents again. I couldn't bear to hear Stephanie's voice or Tyler's silence. I couldn't pretend anymore. Then one scorching afternoon in early September, after my 34th rejection, my phone buzzed while I was in line at a gas station. "Hello, is this Anna?" "Yes," I said, gripping the phone too tightly. "This is Rachel from Pine and Home Designs. I saw your application. Do you have time to come in tomorrow for an interview?" I almost dropped the phone. Yes, absolutely, thank you so much." I sat in my truck afterward with the engine off and windows down, sweat pooling at my back, and I cried, not from sadness but because someone finally saw me, even just a little. The interview was in a small office on the edge of the suburbs, a place with mismatched furniture and friendly, tired smiles. Rachel was kind. She looked at my resume, then looked at my eyes. "You've been through a lot," she said quietly. "But you didn't give up. That's what we need here." I got the job. The starting pay was modest, but I didn't care. It was more than a paycheck. It was oxygen. I worked like my life depended on it, because it did. I stocked fabric samples. I labeled boxes in the warehouse. I picked up customer calls with a cheerful tone. I practiced every night in the mirror. At night, I crawled back into my suffocating camper with blistered feet and sore hands. But I slept with purpose. I stopped thinking in terms of one day. I started thinking, soon. No more takeout, just sandwiches from home, no more new clothes, just clean ones. I tracked every dollar on a spreadsheet taped to the dashboard. Every check, I set aside a little more. And then, 12 months later, I saw it. A small beat-up 3-bedroom house in Beaver. The backyard was overgrown, the walls were peeling, but the bones were strong. The asking price? $92,000. Way more than I had. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. I walked into that bank, held up my pay stubs, my savings plan, my numbers, my dreams, and prayed. And when they approved the loan, I signed with hands that shook. Not with fear, but with disbelief. On the day I got the keys, I walked into that empty house with nothing but a backpack and an air mattress. I dropped everything, stood in the middle of the dusty floorboards, and whispered, "I finally made it. This is mine." I thought I finally had peace. Each morning I made coffee in a chipped mug I found at a thrift store and stood by the window, watching sunlight spill across the overgrown lawn. My camper sat parked in the backyard like a relic, battered but proud, a reminder of where I came from, a monument to everything I survived. I painted the living room walls myself, scrubbed the floors until my knees ached, ate dinner on a second-hand folding table by candlelight and felt like a queen. My bed was still an air mattress, but I slept sounder than I ever had. I was rebuilding brick by invisible brick. And just when it started to feel safe, like maybe I could exhale fully, trouble found me again. It was a Saturday. The air smelled like pine and lemon cleaner. I had been scrubbing the baseboards on my hands and knees when the doorbell rang, sharp, urgent, insistent. I wiped my hands, walked to the front door, and cracked it open. I froze. Standing on my porch were the last people I ever wanted to see. My parents, Tyler, Stephanie, and their 3 kids. Before I could speak, they pushed past me like I wasn't even there. My mom gave a slow nod, scanning the space like a realtor. Tyler dropped onto the couch with a grunt, rubbing his stomach. Stephanie wrinkled her nose at the curtains I'd hung by hand. Then my mother said, too casually, "This house seems a bit too big for a lonely girl like you, doesn't it?" I felt my jaw clench, my pulse quickened. Tyler stretched, yawned like he'd just gotten home from work, and said, "We've been thinking. It's crowded at Mom and Dad's, the kids need space. You've got space." Stephanie stepped forward, her voice sickeningly sweet. "So we'll move in. You can stay in your camper, right? You're used to it." I stared at her, unable to speak. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice low. Tyler smiled like he was doing me a favor. "We'll live in the house. You can move back to the camper. Makes the most sense." I looked around, at the walls I painted, the floors I scrubbed, the home I built piece by piece. And then I looked at my family, not the people I once longed for, but strangers who had laughed when I was at my lowest, and now stood here trying to take the only thing I had left. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "This is my house. You don't get to decide." Stephanie's smile dropped. "Wow, so selfish. Your family needs you. Are you really going to let the kids be cramped and miserable?" I turned to my parents, hoping, maybe foolishly, for fairness. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. "Don't make this difficult," he said coldly. "This is your family." Something cracked inside me. Something old. Something that had been held together with silence and fear for far too long. "Where was this family?" I asked, "when I was sleeping in a truck during winter? When I called begging for help and you laughed?" The room fell silent. Then Stephanie stepped forward and without warning slapped me. Hard. The sound rang out like a whip. My face burned, my vision blurred. "You deserve that," she hissed. "Ungrateful bitch." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone, thumb steady despite the adrenaline in my veins, and said clearly into the speaker, "I need police assistance. I've been assaulted and there are intruders in my home." In an instant, they snapped out of it. Tyler stuttered, tried to pull Stephanie back. My parents went pale, but I didn't waver. "Leave my house," I said, my voice rising with every word. "If you're still here when the police arrive, you'll be explaining yourselves to them." Stephanie threw a tantrum. Tyler tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. I didn't budge. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. I showed them the footage from my security camera, everything from the moment they barged in to the moment Stephanie hit me. No more words were needed. The officers politely but firmly escorted them out. I watched them pack their things in bitter silence. Stephanie sobbing dramatically while my mother shot me one last look, full of betrayal. But this time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I thought that was the end of it. That once they were escorted off my porch by uniformed officers, they would finally get the message. This house is mine, not theirs, not anymore. But I underestimated how far desperation and entitlement could go. 3 days later, after a long shift at work, I pulled into my driveway, humming quietly, the sun dipping behind the horizon. My heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. I was even considering baking for the first time in years. But as I reached for my keys, I noticed something off. The porch light was on. The blinds, which I always left half open, were drawn. My gut twisted. I rushed to the door, reached for the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, heart racing, still jammed. Then I noticed it, strange furniture through the window. A toy truck by the stairs. And my old camper, the one I parked so carefully behind the house, now dragged out onto the curb like trash. I banged on the door, it creaked open. And there they were, Tyler and Stephanie, standing in my living room like they belonged there. Like the last incident never happened. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, voice shaking. Stephanie smiled, her face glowing with fake innocence. "You're trespassing, Anna. This is our home now." Tyler held up a stack of papers, smug as ever. "We have a lease. You signed it. We're legal tenants." My stomach dropped. I snatched the papers from his hand. A poorly forged rental agreement. My name scribbled in a style so unlike mine, it was almost laughable. Sloppy details, inconsistent font, the kind of document even a child could see through. They really thought this would hold up? This is fake, I hissed, holding the papers up. Stephanie shrugged. Well, prove it. I didn't respond. I turned, stepped outside, and pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady this time. My voice was clear. Yes, I need police at address. My home has been broken into. I have forged documents and trespassers inside. As I sat on the porch steps, heart pounding, I saw movement behind the curtains. Tyler trying to argue, Stephanie pacing, panic starting to set in. 15 minutes later, red and blue lights painted the street. The officers were different this time, but their faces changed the moment I showed them the footage from the security camera. Tyler and Stephanie picking the lock, dragging furniture in, changing the hardware. There it was, in time-stamped HD. Ma'am, one officer asked gently, may we see your ID to verify the signature? I handed over my license. The signature on it, neat, practiced, entirely different from the scribble on their fake lease, said everything. The officers didn't need to deliberate long. One turned to Tyler and Stephanie, firm but polite. You're trespassing. This is a criminal offense. You'll need to pack your things immediately. Stephanie, like clockwork, burst into tears. You don't understand. We have children. We had no choice. You had a choice, I cut in coldly, when I begged for help and you left me in a parking lot. Tyler's face flushed. Come on, Anna. Be reasonable. I was reasonable. Then you forged my name and broke into my house. Stephanie wailed louder, clinging to the officer's arm like a bad soap opera performance. But this time, there was no audience to applaud. Just quiet, growing shame. Box by box, they were forced to haul out everything they'd dragged in. Mismatched bags, broken toys, pots and pans they never had the right to bring. When the last item hit the sidewalk, Stephanie turned to me one last time, her eyes full of rage. You'll regret this, she spat, venom dripping from every syllable. I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. I stepped inside, locked the door, and leaned against it as the weight of everything collapsed around me. The tears came then. Not because I was sad. Because I was tired. Tired of always having to prove I deserved what was already mine. Tired of always being the one who had to stand alone. But this time, I hadn't backed down. And that mattered. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the middle of my living room floor, the very spot where I once whispered, I made it, and stared at the door they'd tried to steal from me. My cheek still stung faintly where Stephanie had slapped me days ago. But now, it wasn't the sting that haunted me, it was the silence. For too long I had swallowed it, bit my tongue. Let them define the narrative. Anna the distant one, Anna the cold one, Anna who turned her back on family. But that night, something shifted. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling. I didn't even know what I was going to write until the words started pouring out, raw, honest, messy. I started from the beginning. Last year, when I lost my job during the pandemic, I called my family. I asked if I could stay with them for a little while, just until I found work again. They laughed. They said, "This house is full. We can't feed another mouth." So I lived in my truck. For months. I told them everything. About the freezing nights, the camper, the dozens of job rejections, the first job offer that made me sob in a gas station parking lot, the house I bought with my own hands. And then, I wrote about the knock at the door. About my parents showing up uninvited. About Tyler and Stephanie demanding I move into the camper so they could take my home. About being slapped. About calling the police, twice. About the forged lease, the forced entry, the security footage, the officers removing them by law. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't insult them. I simply told the truth. I attached photos, the fake lease, and my real signature, side by side. Screenshots from the security camera. A scan of the police report. And at the very end, I wrote, I've stayed silent my whole life, but silence is how injustice survives. This is my truth, believe it or not, but I will not be trampled anymore. Then I hit post. Within minutes, the comments started. And within hours, it exploded. People I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me privately. Some relatives, the ones who used to nod politely at family gatherings but never ask questions, sent me long emotional notes. I always wondered why they treated you like that. I just didn't have the courage to speak up. Anna, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You did the right thing. Finally, someone in this family stood up. Even older relatives, the ones who had witnessed the favoritism when I was still a child, started chiming in. Aunt Melanie wrote, I remember when you won the spelling bee in 6th grade, and your mom told you to stop showing off while she baked a cake for Tyler passing math with a D. An uncle I hadn't seen in a decade said, that boy has always been spoiled rotten, and Stephanie, well, I think we all see it now. The tide turned. Suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. And Tyler? Stephanie? My parents? They tried to fight back, of course they did. Tyler posted a vague status, people will always twist stories to make themselves look good. Stephanie made a dramatic post about forgiveness and how family should stick together. But under each post were dozens of furious comments. You forged her signature. You broke into her house. You laughed when she was homeless, now you cry because you got caught. Even their old allies, the ones who used to defend their sweet little family, backed away. And then, one call came that I didn't expect. Aunt Lucy. She had always been kind to me, but quiet, never one to get involved. Her voice shook on the line. Anna, she whispered, I saw the post. If you ever need anything, a place to stay, a hot meal, a shoulder, my door is open. I'm proud of you. So proud. For the first time in years, I felt something deep and overwhelming. Recognition. Not pity, not obligation, not the hollow kind of praise you give out of guilt, but real, genuine recognition of everything I had endured, everything I had fought through alone. I stood in my quiet house, phone still buzzing with messages, and looked around. I had no fancy furniture, no expensive things, but I had something better. The truth. And this time, people saw it. In small towns like ours, truth doesn't whisper. It echoes. And once it's out, it doesn't fade. It spreads. Within weeks the story had woven itself into every grocery line, cafe corner, and church bulletin whisper. I didn't need to repeat anything. People already knew. The golden boy and his picture-perfect wife weren't so golden anymore. Tyler and Stephanie were still crammed into my parents' old 3-bedroom house, and from what I heard through Aunt Lucy, the tension was thick enough to slice with a butter knife. 3 loud kids, constant arguing, no money, and shattered pride. It was a slow, quiet collapse. Tyler, once smug and untouchable, now looked hollow. The man who used to stroll into rooms like he owned them now barely looked anyone in the eye. He took double shifts at a factory just outside town. People said he didn't talk much, just clocked in, worked like a machine, and left. Stephanie, of course, still refused to work. She insisted on taking care of the kids, though everyone knew she spent most days scrolling through her phone or napping while the kids ran wild. But the worst blow? It came in the spring. The rumor started in hushed tones that Stephanie had been seeing someone, a bartender just a few blocks from my parents' house. At first, I dismissed it. Drama travels fast in small towns and facts get twisted like laundry on a windy line. But then I got a call from Aunt Lucy. Tyler ran a DNA test on the youngest, she whispered. He didn't say much, just stood outside in the yard with the results, like he couldn't breathe. The child, the one Stephanie claimed was his, wasn't. It was like watching a final domino fall. Tyler, for all his faults, had loved her once. Foolishly. Blindly. But that paper tore through what little illusion he had left. He filed for divorce that same week. It was messy. Stephanie cried, begged, claimed it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that their family was all she had. But the judge saw right through it. With the DNA results, screenshots of texts and witness testimonies, Stephanie's performance crumbled in court. Not only was she denied spousal support, the judge also granted Tyler custody of the 2 older kids, and had his name removed from the youngest child's birth certificate. Stephanie walked out of court with nothing. No money, no house, no sympathy. She moved back in with her own family over 70 miles away, dragging the youngest with her. As for Tyler, he packed 2 duffel bags, grabbed the kids, and moved out of my parents' house. He rented a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a cheaper part of town. Word is, he keeps to himself now. Quiet, tired. My parents? They didn't say much. She moved back in with her own family over 70 miles away, dragging the youngest with her. As for Tyler, he packed 2 duffel bags, grabbed the kids, and moved out of my parents' house. He rented a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a cheaper part of town. Word is, he keeps to himself now. Quiet, tired. My parents? They didn't say much. The same people who once treated Stephanie like a queen now pretended she never existed. The same people who turned me away when I had nothing were suddenly sitting alone in their house, cold, quiet, and smaller than ever. And me? I finally had peace. No more threats, no more unannounced visits, no more pretending that family meant anything more than blood. My house became a haven. I painted the hallway a warm honey yellow, bought myself a real bed, started collecting used books again. On quiet Sundays, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, the morning breeze wrapping around me like a blanket, and think, this is what safety feels like. I even began renting out the 2 spare rooms, one to Megan, a night shift nurse with a soft voice and kind eyes, and the other to Chris, a traveling construction engineer who kept mostly to himself. They were respectful, independent, and they paid on time. With their rent, my mortgage was nearly covered. Financially, I was steady. Emotionally, I was healing. And then something I never expected happened. Tyler started bringing the kids by, not unannounced, never without texting first, always humble, always careful. He never pushed, never assumed. Emma, 8 years old, big brown eyes and a giggle like wind chimes, loved to sit on the living room floor with crayons, drawing suns and houses and stick figures with wild hair. Max, 10, shy at first, slowly opened up when I found him an old GameCube at a flea market. He called it ancient, but played it for hours. One Saturday afternoon, as I fixed up the rusty swing in the backyard, Max looked at me and asked, "Ziviana, why do you live alone? Isn't it lonely?" I smiled, wiping sweat from my brow. "Not really," I said. "Living alone just means I get to decide how I live." Emma hugged my arm and whispered, "I like your house, it's cozy and it smells like pancakes." Their words, so innocent, so true, melted something in me. I didn't need a picture-perfect family. I had peace. And slowly, piece by piece, I was building something better, a life that was mine. Winter came quietly that year. The wind was gentler, the silence in the evenings felt softer, not hollow. And for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for anything to go wrong. I let myself breathe, fully, without flinching. One weekend I helped Emma and Max set up a Christmas tree outside, just like we used to see in those cozy neighborhood movies. We didn't have expensive ornaments or color-matching themes, just handmade paper stars, plastic reindeer from the dollar bin, and string lights I found in a clearance bin. But when we switched them on that evening, the whole yard glowing under the soft blanket of snow, it felt like magic. We stood there, the 3 of us, laughing as Max added a crooked star on top. "Ziviana," Emma said, tugging at my sleeve, "can we come every Christmas?" I didn't answer right away. My throat was too full. I just nodded, smiled, and whispered, "Of course." Inside, the old house hummed with warmth. The kind that doesn't come from heaters, but from peace. From knowing that the people inside your walls see you, not just tolerate you. Tyler dropped the kids off most weekends now. He didn't say much, a small wave, a soft thank you. There was something worn in his eyes, something humbled. He looked like a man who had finally learned what loss really meant, and what mattered enough to keep. Sometimes he'd stay for dinner, just the 4 of us. Simple meals, awkward pauses, but no yelling, no expectations, just an effort to be better. My parents kept their distance. Our conversations were brief, polite. My mom sent a birthday card this year. No money inside, just a small note in shaky handwriting. "Anna, you built a life. I wish I had seen you sooner." It wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was something, and I didn't need more, because I wasn't that little girl anymore, standing in the corner of the room with a certificate no one clapped for. I wasn't the shadow behind someone else's spotlight. I was the woman who survived winter in a truck, who bought a house with scraped knuckles and sleepless nights, who stood alone in a courtroom and didn't flinch. I was the woman who turned silence into truth, and truth into freedom. One cold evening in late January, I sat on the porch wrapped in a thick quilt, watching the streetlights flicker to life. The house behind me buzzed with quiet joy. Megan laughing softly in the kitchen, Chris humming while fixing the leaky bathroom faucet. And then there was me. Just me. Whole. Not waiting for anyone to rescue me, not proving anything to anyone, just living. Sometimes I thought about Stephanie. Where she was. What her life had become. I knew she would always blame me, that in her version of the story I'd be the villain who ruined her perfect setup. But I'd learned something precious. You don't need to be understood by the people who broke you. You just need to understand yourself. And I finally did. I didn't build this life to make a point. I built it because I was worth it. I stayed alive for this version of myself, the one who wakes up in a sunlit bedroom, who makes coffee in silence, who laughs with children who love her back, who writes her name on documents that are real, signed with hands that no longer shake. Before heading in, I looked at the old camper in the backyard, its dented side, the faded sticker still clinging to the rear window. And I smiled, because that camper didn't represent shame anymore. It represented beginning. I whispered into the wind, "You got me through it, and I'll never forget." Then I walked back inside, into the warmth, into the life I chose, into a future I had earned, entirely and unapologetically mine. My story isn't just about survival, it's about returning to yourself, and realizing you were enough all along.